movie, we'll add some text notes to our drawings. It comes a point in your projects where your model is at a level of completion where you want to begin adding some notes to clarify design intent or to prepare the drawing for printing. So in this movie, we're going to look at the simple text tools that we have available on Revit to help us do that. So I'm in a file called text, and I'm just looking at an elevation view. If I go to the Annotate tab, I can locate the text tool right here. Now the shortcut is TX, and you can also find it on the Quick Access toolbar. I'm going to accept all the defaults for right now. Just simply click a point where I want to start placing the note and type in what I want it to say. Now, to complete the note, you actually click next to the note. Don't press enter or escape. A lot of times people make that mistake. If you do, it'll actually cancel the command. You won't have any notes. So you want to click next to it to complete the note. And you'll see the note appear on the screen, and you can move it around with this grip that's attached directly to the note. That's pretty handy. You can even rotate it if you want to with this little grip here. And an interesting thing starts to happen if you rotate around past 90 degrees. Revit will actually flip it around and keep it right reading. So that's kind of handy. Let me do Control Z a few times to undo that. Now, the most obvious thing about this note is it's a little bit large. So what I'm going to do is cancel out of the command, select the note, and let's look over here at the properties palette. Like other objects in Revit, text has a family and a type. So the family is just text. That's a built-in family, a system family here. But the type in this case is 1/4-inch aerial. You can see it listed there. And if I open the list here, there's actually another type called 3/32 inch aerial. So I'm going to choose that. And you see that the size of my note will adjust and will become a lot smaller. How big is that? I mean, what does that actually mean? Well, here it's telling us that we're using Arial, that's the font, and it's 3/32 inch tall. So that height is consistent relative to final printed output. If you look down here at the bottom of your screen, there's a scale here on the view control bar. We're currently at 1/8 inch equals a foot. If I click that pop-up and change to 1/4 inch equals a foot, what you'll see is all the annotation on the screen actually adjusts. This note got smaller, so does the section head here and the level heads over here. So another way to say that is if you had a sheet full of drawings and some of the drawings on the sheet were 1/8 inch equals a foot and some were 1/4 inch, if they were side by side, the 3/32 inch aerial would be the same size relative to the sheet for both of those drawings, even though the underlying building would be at two different scales. So that's kind of a nice feature, is that all the annotation here reacts to the scale. I should also mention that these are annotative elements. So we talked about this in a previous movie, but what that means is this text belongs to this view. You won't see this text in any other view. All annotation is view specific in Revit. So keep that in mind, that if you need a stone parapet note in some other elevation, you'll have to add it there as well. Now, let me zoom in on this note, and I'll take in a little bit of the building here. And let's go ahead and move it just a little closer, and let's make some further adjustments. With the note selected, you'll see some features over here on the Modify tab. So we can add leaders to this note, either the left or right, and either straight or curved. So I'm going to do a straight leader over on the right, and I've got a couple of grips here that I can use to adjust it. I'll point it at this parapet here, and this grip here in the middle allows me to add an elbow, and I'll do it like so. Now we can also change the alignment from left, right, and center. I'm going to leave it at left justified for now. Now, if you want to, when you add your next note, you can actually add it with the leader to start with. So let's take a look at that. Go back to the text tool. We did the first note with the no leader option, but I'm going to choose this option here to do a 2-segment leader for the second one. You can also do curved or 1 segment if you want to. The way this works is the first point you click now is the location of the arrowhead. Then you click where you want the elbow to be, and then finally where you want to start typing the note. Now I'm going to put it over here, but I'm going to show you a strange behavior here when we're done. Notice I'm still in 1/4 inch aerial. So let me open that up and change to 3/32. I can do that before I start typing, and then just click back over here and type in what I want my note to say. Now, when I click next to it, remember, click next to it to complete the note. It does this odd little thing. It sort of jumps over to the left. So it's not that big of a deal because we can just use this grip and drag it over, get it to line up, and then use this grip and get that one to line up. Not exactly sure why Revit does it that way, but it's pretty easy to remedy. So let me cancel out of there and select the note. And we've got our leader here. And I want to point out to you that you can actually add additional leaders if you want to. So if I had some geometry over on the left side and I wanted to point to it, I could add a leader over here and use that leader. I can remove the leader that I just created with this button right there. I can add another one on the right as well, and maybe we're going to add another brick soldier course down here, so I could point to that. Now, when you use this remove button, I should mention that it removes in the reverse order from where they were added. So just keep that in mind that sometimes it may not remove the one that you wanted it to. Okay, let's take a look at the settings of the text itself then. Okay, so we've been saying how this is 3/32 and the other one was 1/4 inch, but where did it get those settings? Well, if I click right here, we've got edit type, and this is just like other objects in Revit. And all of the type-based settings are controlled in here. So we have color and line weight. Those things are pretty self-explanatory. Here's our font. All the fonts loaded on your system will be listed there. Revit just uses Windows fonts. Here's the height of the text. If you want to use the tab key, the tab size, bold or italic. And we even have this feature here, which is kind of handy. If you put in, say, a decimal value here like 0.8, and I click apply, watch what's going to happen to the notes. See how they all get a little narrower? So sometimes you need to fit more text in a smaller space, so you can use that feature to help you there. I'm going to set it back to 1. Now, up here, we have this feature called background, and it's currently set to opaque. So let me show you how that works. If I add a new note, deselect all this, click on text, I'm going to turn off the leader option. I'm going to do a note without a leader, pick right here on top of the brick, and type a note. Click out here somewhere to finish the note. Let me zoom in. And notice how there's a little small white mask around the text. If we go to edit type and I change this to transparent, click apply, you're going to see the brick show right through. So that's what that feature does. So that can be really handy if you've got a lot of notes in a tight space to help them be a little bit more legible. The final setting that I want to show you here is, let me zoom back out again first. I'll just do ZP for zoom previous. And I want to direct your attention to these two arrowheads right here. The final setting here is the arrowhead setting. The leader arrowhead is actually part of the text type. So right now I'm using this arrow 30 degree. Maybe you want a filled one. So if I click apply on that, now you can see we have these solid filled arrowheads right there, which some folks like a little bit better. So you can certainly choose whatever arrowhead type that you like. So that's the text features in Revit. Pretty straightforward. Most of the features, I think, are fairly self-explanatory. Remember that the text is view specific, so all of the notes I've added here apply to this view. And if you wanted to reuse any of these notes in other views, you'd have to copy and paste them. So you can place your notes on the view, you can add leaders or leave the text freestanding, and you can even have multiple leaders on the same piece of text if you need to. In this movie, we're going to look a little closer at the dimensions feature in Revit. We've already looked at dimensions in a few other movies, but mainly we were interested in using dimensions as a tool to help us build our model. In this movie, I'm going to focus on dimensions as an annotation tool to actually help enhance our construction documents and prepare drawings for printing. I'm in a file called dimensions, and I'm looking at a level 1 floor plan view, and I'm just going to add some dimensions to various parts of this file here just to show you how it works. So what I'm going to start off with is I'm going to zoom in over in this location over here, and I just want to show you the basics of how the dimension tool works. Now we've covered some of this, so some of this will be review. We can get to the dimension tool in a couple places. We can go to the annotate tab, and there actually are several dimension tools. I'm going to focus on the align dimension tool because this is the one that I use 99% of the time. So you're free to explore some of these others on your own later. They all kind of work the same way. But I'm going to focus on the align tool. What the align tool does is it's aligned with the geometry you're dimensioning. So it's probably the most versatile. So I'm going to click on that, and that same button is right here, and the shortcut is DI. Now, when you highlight an object, it will highlight some part of that object. Now, with walls, we actually have some options. So here you can see that if I put my cursor over it, it's highlighting the face of the wall. And if I move slightly, it gives me the other face of the wall. So if I wanted to say what the inside dimension of this office was over here, I could click this face and then this face. And then if that's all I wanted was just that single little dimension, the third click, the final click, is in empty space. If you click an object and click another object, and then you try and click in the same spot to place it, it will actually remove that witness line. So each time you click, Revit is looking to either add or remove a witness line. And I see folks struggle with this a lot. They'll click a point, and then they'll click again the same point. They'll wonder what happened, and then they'll click it again, and then they'll do it again. Remember that the final click, placing the dimension, has to be an empty space. There has to be no object under your cursor because that's how you're telling Revit, put the dimension here. If there's an object under your cursor, Revit thinks you're dimensioning that object. Now, here on the options bar, we have some settings. So instead of wall faces, if I wanted to, I could dimension the center lines of the walls. So if I choose that, now you'll see it will highlight the center of this wall and the center of this wall, and I'll get a different dimension. So that's certainly an option. Well, If you want to, you could actually do the center on one side, and over here I could say I want to go to the outside face. Well, how would I do that? Put your mouse over the outside face and press the tab key. Even though you've chosen your preference on the drop down there, you can still override it anytime with the tab key. So you just tab until the object that you want a dimension highlights, and that's when you click to verify that selection. And then of course I can place the dimension. So those dimensions there, I'm just using as sort of warm up to kind of get us started. Let's zoom previous to get back out to the overall plan here, and let's go a little deeper. The other thing that we can do, all of these examples I did in here were just individual dimensions, just between 2 points. But I wanted to also make sure that you understand that you can select 2 points like these 2 grid lines and then keep going. And so I can make a continuous string of dimensions by just continuing to add more and more dimension references. And again, it ends the same way as the previous ones. You click in empty space to finish it. So those are the basic mechanics of placing the dimensions, but let's take it a little deeper now. If we look up here in the options bar, under this pick option here, there's 2 choices, and we've been doing the individual references, but we also have this feature here called entire walls. Now, what's handy about this is you can select the wall now instead of the 2 sides that you want to dimension, and Revit will figure out where the 2 witness lines should go. It'll do the whole wall. Now, in this case, I'm just getting one wall end to end, maybe not exactly the dimension I had in mind. But there's an options button right here, and if I click that, we have a whole bunch of options here that we can look at. So we can include the openings when we're making that dimension. You can dimension to their center lines or their widths. I personally like the widths, so let's take a look at that. I'm going to click OK. Let's zoom in down here. Pick this wall, and look at that. Now, that's going to be a big time saver, because if we did the same thing with individual references, we would have to click each one of these points to get to that location. Now, you notice how I still have wall center line here, so it was picking up the center line. So these 2 work together. If I go to wall faces, zoom out just a touch, pick this wall. Now you can see that that final dimension is going out to the face of the wall. Let's zoom all the way out. I'm going to do zoom to fit, ZF. Let's go to options again. If you want to, you could add the intersecting walls in your dimensions. Let's see what that looks like. Now, I tend to think this is just a little too busy for my taste. There's an awful lot going on here. Now, let's say that you did like this and you wanted to go with that. I'm going to cancel out of the command. You can't read any of these dimensions at the current state. So if you click on the dimension, there's these little dots right here, these little grips, and you can use that to drag the text away. Now, if you drag it far enough, it'll actually add a leader pointing back again. You can have that leader point back, and that makes it, I think, a little bit more legible. So if you started to pull all of these labels away, you could start to make this dimension a little bit easier to read. But I'm actually going to delete this dimension and zoom back out again and do it slightly differently. If I go to options, I'm going to turn off the intersecting walls, but I'm going to turn on intersecting grids instead. Let's take a look at that. Now when I click this wall, it's a little bit less busy. It's including the grid line here and the grid line here, and then the rest of it kind of ignores the interior walls. I tend to prefer doing a different string for the interior than the exterior, so you can see that it's a little bit cleaner. You may still need to move a few of those pieces of text over there. Now let's pan it over here. What about this wall here? The only downside of the pick walls feature is you can only pick one wall at a time, but you can select an existing dimension, and then up here on the ribbon, we can choose edit witness lines. Now, when I click this button, this just takes me back into a mode where I can add in more dimension lines. So I'm going to add a witness line here at the end of the curtain wall, one here and here on each side of the door, one over here at the outside edge of the wall. Now, the final click has to be an empty space, just like we did when we were creating the dimension in the first place. So don't press escape or enter here, you'll lose all your work. Click in the empty white space, and that will complete the dimension, and you now have this continuous string here. Now, let's say that for whatever reason, I wanted to exclude this line right here. I want to basically break this dimension into 2 pieces. Highlight the dimension, press your tab key, and it will actually let you reach in and pick an individual segment. You can click on it, and then you can just delete that. And now I've got this dimension and this dimension as 2 separate dimensions. So that's a handy new feature because there really was no way to do that before. You'd have to delete the entire dimension and start again. So I'm going to undo that and get that one back again. Another really neat feature that we can do is we can edit the text value. So let's say that this curtain wall is existing and we don't know exactly how big it is. I can click right on the text, and what this is you're editing the dimension text now. And the actual value is the 17 foot 10 inches, but we can replace that with an alternate value like VIF for verifying field. And it will replace the numerical value with the text value. Now, you can't put in a number here. Revit will not be happy about that. In fact, it will display a dialog and tell you that that's not allowed. So this can be replaced with text, not with a number. So I'm going to go back to use actual value, and you can actually add modifiers on any of the four sides around the text as well. So maybe you want to say that it's close to 17 foot 10, but you want them to verify. So you could add the note below or something. So let's zoom all the way out and check our work. There's nothing like some dimensions to make a drawing start feeling like a construction document. So we're getting close to being able to print this drawing out. So feel free to experiment further and add additional dimensions. Remember that you can either do the individual references to the faces or the centers, or you can use the pick walls option to do the entire walls. Pick walls is only available for walls. So if you want a dimension between plumbing fixtures or other elements like columns and so forth, those you'll have to do with the pick references. Architectural drawings incorporate many kinds of symbols. Revit has dedicated tools for text and dimensions, many kinds of tags, and certain kinds of notes. But there's many symbols that don't have their own dedicated tool. So we sort of have a catch-all tool in Revit called just a symbol tool, and we can use that to add any variety of miscellaneous symbols. So in this movie, I'm going to just demonstrate the use of the symbol tool and work with some symbols that are both in the template and some ones that we can load in from the provided content. You can also make your own symbols, but that'll be out of the scope of what we'll cover here. So if you need additional symbols that are not in the out-of-the-box offerings, you certainly have that option. So I'm in a file called symbols. It's just a floor plan view with some dimensions and notes on it already, but I want to add a few symbols, maybe a north arrow, a bar scale, stuff like that. So if I go to the Annotate tab, way over here on the right-hand side, we'll find the symbol tool, and you can see in the tooltip that it says it's just a 2D annotation object. So when I click on that, what that means is we're not going to expect a whole lot of smarts out of a symbol. It's a pretty low-tech tool, if you will. It's just a graphical symbol. So on my cursor right now is the centerline symbol, and I'm going to place one of those right about here in the white space, zoom in, and I've got this dimension here, and you can see the little center line symbol. Let me cancel out of there. Click it. It's got its own little move grip, so we can move it around. But first, I'm going to go to the rotate command, put in an angle here. Let's rotate it 90 degrees, just so that it matches the orientation of that dimension. And then I'll use this little move grip to move it close by, and that's all there is to it. So again, it's just a really simple process. You just find the symbol you want, drop it in, and position it. Let's zoom previous, try another one, go to the symbol tool, open up the list. You've also got a north arrow in here. Now again, not to disappoint you, but you may be expecting the north arrow to actually know which direction north is. Revit doesn't actually have a tool that does that. So the north arrow is again just a generic symbol. So what you do is you just place it in. Now you saw me rotate the centerline symbol after I placed it with the rotate command. We also have this option here where you could say rotate after placement. And the way that works is I'll click the point and then it will immediately go into a rotation command. And so maybe I'll rotate it in this direction a little bit like so. If I rotate it a little bit too far, that's when I could just click the rotate tool and rotate it back again. So you can certainly fine tune it afterwards, but the rotate after placement just gives you the option to do it sort of in one step. So let's cancel out of there. Okay, well, those are the two symbols that were loaded into the template. Pretty straightforward. So I want to put a bar scale under here. I don't have that one loaded in, so where would we get that? Well, like model families, we would just click on the Load Family button and see what's been provided for us in the out-of-the-box library. Now you can choose any symbol you want here. I'm going to use a bar scale, so I'm going to go to this Annotations folder. And then if we scroll down here a little bit, you can see what's available here. You can see there's some other north arrows and different kinds of view titles and section heads and so forth. But if I go up a little bit, we'll find our graphic scales. and I've got an 1/8 inch one here and a 1/4 inch one. So notice that the scales are actually built in because, again, annotation or symbol is pretty low tech. So it's not actually automatically seeing what scale the drawing is. So you have to actually build it for that scale. So that's why this one says 1/8 here. I'll open it up and I'll place it where I want it to go. If you zoom in on it, you can see that it's got the graphical indications for how big everything is. But let's take a look at how this looks on our sheet. So if I scroll down here, here's my floor plan sheet A1, and I've got the first floor and the second floor. This is the one we've been working on. We'll zoom in over here. So it might be a little easier to kind of understand how all this stuff works, seeing it in context here. But you could actually print this drawing now at full scale and put your scale ruler on this bar scale, and you would find that from here to here is actually 16 feet. Or you can measure those points here and compare them to your model and see that it's actually 16 feet. So the symbol tool is just a really simple way of adding any kind of graphical symbol that is not included in one of the other tools somewhere in Revit, and it allows you to add all those finishing touches that you need to your drawings before you print them out. If you'd like to add a legend to your project, perhaps showing each kind of door or window that you used with an elevation view or some notes indicating its construction or its function, there's no need to draw this manually. A legend view in Revit allows you to place a graphical representation of any family used in your project. You'll be able to control the scale and level of detail, and you'll be able to insert it as either a plan or an elevation symbol. And the nice thing about a legend view is that these graphics are only representational, and so they won't be included in any counts in your model, so they won't throw off your schedules or anything like that. So I'm in a file here called Legends, and I'd like to take a look at this feature by creating a door types legend. So it's pretty common in architectural drawings for us to create a legend showing an elevation of each of our doors. So that'll be a good example for us to look at here. So on the project browser, I have a Legends branch, and it's currently empty because there's no legends in this project. You can either right-click right here and create a new legend, or you can use the View tab on the ribbon right here, and you can add a new legend right here. It's the same either way. Give it a name. So I'll call this door types. It's suggesting a scale of 1/4 inch equals a foot, and I'm fine with that, so I'll click OK. And I get a blank sheet of paper. Now, if you look over here on the project browser, we now have a door types legend there in that branch. So it's this empty sheet. If I go to the Annotate tab, we have under Component here a small drop down. And we're going to look actually at some of these other features in a future movie. But for right now, we're going to look at the legend component. And when I choose that, you'll see some options appear on the options bar. There's a list right here, and if you look, it's a pretty extensive list. So what this is every model family and type in your project. So that's why the list is so long. And what we can do here is locate the items that we're using. Like, for example, I'm using this door single flush 36 by 84. Now, when I choose that, it's going to come in as a plan version. But right here, I can choose to either do a front or a back elevation. I'm going to do a front elevation, and you'll see the symbol appear on my cursor, and then I just click the place where I want it to go. I can choose the next size. So I have a single glass door, and they kind of line up with each other. And double glass door. And finally, this curtain wall door. This one is a little strange because curtain wall doors react to the size of the curtain wall. So they don't have sizes in the same way that our regular doors do, but they give you this field right here where you can modify it. So I can put in a size that's a little bit better, like maybe 6 feet, and get this thing a little closer to what I want it to be. Now, after you've placed all of these, you can move them around and make adjustments. You can even use your align tool and kind of make sure that everything's lined up with one another, like so. And then you can add some text and some notes and dimensions to it. So for example, here's my align dimension tool. Maybe I want to do that. In the dimensions movie, we talked about how you can override this text. So maybe I don't want to actually show the size there. I might want to say something a little more generic like that. In the text movie, we talked about how we could add text. So I can give this a label. And so when you're done, it might look something like this. So all it remains is to take this legend now and place it on an appropriate sheet. So if I scroll down on my project browser here, I've got a bunch of sheets. And if we go down to the door schedule sheet, sheet A13, you can see it's got some schedules on it already. Let's open that up. This is usually a pretty good place to put your door legend. Now, the way you do this is you scroll back up on the project browser, you locate the view that you want to add on the sheet, and this works with any view. We're going to do it here with the legend. And I'm just going to start dragging it from project browser. And you'll see a little plus sign on my cursor, and then let go. And then you'll see the view, and I can place it where I'd like it to go just by clicking. And now you'll see that it's there on the sheet. So anytime you need to create a legend to define the various types of objects, maybe you want to do a window legend or a door legend, you can use the legend feature. And again, one of the really nice features of the legend feature is that these graphics are just representational of the objects. They don't actually change the counts or the quantities in your schedules. In this and the next few movies, we're going to look at the detailing process in Revit. Details are an integral part of any architectural documentation package. However, one of the challenges of working in building information modeling and software like Revit is there's this temptation to overmodel everything. In other words, it's theoretically possible to add items like flashing and fasteners and bolts and screws directly to your model. However, typically such items would only show in large-scale views. And in smaller scale views, they'd actually kind of get in the way. So we want to resist the temptation to model such elements. There's little payoff in modeling them, and you often pay a high price in diminished computer performance. For such items, we continue to rely on traditional detailed drawings. This has always been the case in architectural communication. Revit offers a full complement of tools to facilitate the detailing process and does so in a way that maximizes the potential of both the live 3D model and the large-scale detail embellishments that we place on top. So to get us started, I'm in a file here called Detail Callout. And what I'm going to demonstrate for you over the course of this and the next few movies is what I like to call the hybrid detailing process. It's hybrid because the detail will begin with an underlay of the live model, which will get us started and give us the basic framework. And then on top of that, we're going to add a series of 2D embellishments, both in the form of drafted entities and text and dimensions and other kinds of annotations. So therefore, it starts with a callout. So I'm in a view called Section at Stair. And if we zoom in this general area here, what I want to do is create a detail of the stair landing. So on my View tab, we have a call out button right here, and you can use this command to call out any portion of a plan, section, or elevation view. And all you have to do is click and drag 2 points to create a rectangular region, and you'll see your call out symbol appear. On the project browser, you'll get a new view called Callout of Section at Stair. And I suppose you could leave that name, but that's not a very good name, so I'm going to rename it. Now, you can right-click and choose Rename like we've done before, or you can actually use the shortcut, which is the F2 key on your keyboard. And I'm going to rename this Stair Landing Detail. Click OK. Now, you can either double-click it here, or you can double-click the blue circle there to open it up. And what you see is this is an enlarged call-out view of just that area. It's enlarged to 1/4 inch equals a foot in this case. And of course, it's cropped down to just that area. So let's start off by talking about this crop region right here. If I highlight it, you'll see the rectangle on the inside highlight there, and then a further dashed rectangle appear outside of that. I'm going to start off by talking about this one right here in the inside. This is controlling what we're seeing. This is your model crop, that inner rectangle. Now, if you look down here at the view control bar, we've got these 2 little icons right here. One says hide the crop region, and the other one says do not crop the view. Now, these are both toggle switches. So if you click them, the little tooltips will actually change because they'll serve a new function. Let me click the one that says hide the crop region. And that object that I had selected there, that double rectangle, disappears. So it does exactly what it says. It's just going to hide the crop region. And notice here, when I highlight it, it now says show the crop region. Now, if you scroll here on the properties palette, you'll see under the extents area, there's a crop region visible checkbox and it's now turned off. If I check it, the crop region comes back and the little toggle switch reverses. So these two toggles are actually the same as these two checkboxes. Now, the one next to it that says do not crop the view, same as if I uncheck this box right here, will suddenly show me the entire view again. And if I zoom out, you'll see it's the full building again. So what makes a call out is simply that the crop region is focused in on a very small area and it's turned on. So we want to make sure that that stays on. Now let's talk about that third checkbox, annotation crop region. That's the dashed line that's appearing around the perimeter here. Let me zoom in a little bit. And to talk about the annotation crop, I really need a piece of annotation. So I'm going to add a piece of text here, and I'm going to call this click next to it to place the note. And what you see is that note is sitting right on top of the drawing. So to make it a little bit more legible, I want to start moving it. Well, watch what happens if I move a little too far. Oops, there it goes. So I'm going to pull it out here and I'm going to let go. What actually happened? Well, this dashed line here is the annotation crop, and it only displays annotation that falls within that region. Now, there's two remedies. You could, of course, use this little grip here and stretch that out to make it large enough for the notes. Some people like to do it that way. Or you can simply come down here and turn off the annotation crop. Now, where the annotation crop has the most value is for floor plans or overall elevations where you're working on both sides of a match line. For detail, I don't think the annotation crop has too much value. So I typically turn it off in my details, but it's really entirely up to you. If you want to resize it, you can do that as well. Now, when I look at this, however, at the size of the text here and the size of the detail, I say, well, maybe 1/4 inch isn't quite the right scale. So I'm actually going to go something much larger here and use 1.5 inch equals a foot. Now, of course, that means my note now is way far away. So let's just pull that in a little closer. We'll be using that in a few minutes. And then I want to now make some fine-tuned adjustments here to the extent of this detail. I want to show a few more treads than what I'm seeing here. So if I click on the crop, I can actually adjust this with these little dots here and show a little bit more of the detail. I can also crop it in a little closer in these other directions. And the thing that I want you to understand here is when you make changes like that, you are affecting the actual live view. You're affecting the call out. So if you go back to the section, notice that these crop handles have adjusted as well. They are one and the same. So if you adjust it in this view, or if you adjust it in the actual call out, you're really adjusting the same thing. Now, that brings to light some additional objects that are displaying here in this view that are really I'm not crazy about. If I highlight here, you can see here and here, I'm seeing mullions beyond. Now, if you went back to the main drawing, you would see that there's a curtain wall behind our staircase here. And so for an overall section, that's fine. But here in the detail, that makes it a little busy. So I want to get rid of some of that clutter. If we scroll down on the project browser back under the extents grouping again, you'll see that there's a far clip setting and it currently says same as parent. I can change that to independent. So same as parent means that it's using the same view depth that the original view the callout came from is using. And they're sort of tied together. If I change it to independent, I can now edit this bar clip offset feature and I can reduce the number. I'm going to just pick a number like maybe 6 feet. That ought to do the trick. And when I apply that, notice that all those mullions disappear. So when you want to create a hybrid detail in Revit, it starts with a callout. You can create a callout from any plan, section, or elevation view. You're going to want to adjust things like the scale and the annotation crop and maybe the far clip offset. You might even want to do some visibility graphics adjustments and turn some features on and off. In other words, you're trying to leverage as much as you can from that underlying 3D view. So do whatever you can to kind of get yourself in the best position so that when you do start adding your 2D detail components on top, you've limited the amount of work that you have to do to just what's required. And in the next few movies, we'll look at the process of actually adding those detail embellishments. In this movie, we'll continue working on our detail and we'll look at detail components. Detail components are two-dimensional families that represent model objects. Now, they're two-dimensional and they're view-specific, and this is important to understand. You can create very detailed versions of elements that represent model objects, but because they're two-dimensional and because they're view-specific, they only show in the view that you draw them in the detail view in this case. And that allows you to keep the overall size of your model manageable and not have a lot of details created in the 3D model that don't really give you any benefit. So let's take a look at the process of placing detail components. I'm in a file called detail components, and I'm looking at my stair landing detail, which is a section cut through the landing here. So let's zoom in a little bit like so. And I'll start with a really simple detail component. We're going to look at a break line object. So I'm going to go to the Annotate tab, and the detail component is a drop down, and it behaves a little differently than all the other drop down buttons. If you click the drop down, there's three options here, and it remembers whatever the last option you used was. So if the last thing you did was a legend component, the legend component button will be on the top of the pile. If the last thing you did was a repeating detail, that'll be on top of the pile. So if you don't see the detail component on the top of the list, just click the little drop down here and choose it right here. But we want detail component. Now, the break line is the default option that comes up. If we open up the list, there are several detail components that are loaded in this file already. But let's go ahead and start with this break line object. This is used just to add some nice little finishing touch to a detail drawing. Let me show you. I'm going to tap the space bar, and that's going to rotate this thing 90 degrees. And I'm going to place it right over here somewhere on the very end tread there toward the edge. Now, I don't know if you saw what it just did there. Let me zoom in a touch, but you notice how it's covering up the underlying 3D model geometry in the background. Let me zoom back out a touch, tap the space bar twice more, put it over here, and we'll kind of get the same effect on this side. Now, these break marks have kind of like a built-in whiteout. It's a mask object that's built into that object, and it's got these little grips on it. And so I can stretch it up here, take this one, stretch it up here. And what this is helpful to do is it just adds a nice finishing touch to the detail. If you come down here and hide the crop region, that rectangle goes away. But we have these nice little break marks that help the detail look like it was drawn here. So pretty common to see those in a detailed view. And those are detail components. They are view specific and they only appear in this view. So if I go back to the section at stair view and zoom in, you won't see any break marks on top of this view. So I'm going to go ahead and close this view, return to my detail, and let's add a few more detail components. Now, the next one I'm going to add is a simple piece of steel. So if I open up the list here, I've got an AISC channel shapes section, and the type beneath that is C6 by 10.5. And I'm going to choose that. And it's a pretty standard piece of steel here. And I will just place that roughly right about here. I'm going to fine tune the position of these things later. So for now, I just want to get them into the detail so that I have all my raw materials to work with, and then we'll move them around. So you can see it's just a really simple placement. If for whatever reason I needed another one of these at another angle, I can again just tap my space bar, and each time I do, it would rotate. But I only need the one, so that's the only one that I'm going to place there. So the stair tread that we're seeing here from the model, it's close, but it doesn't match the actual construction. So the next component we're going to bring in is a better representation of what this would actually look like. Now, I don't have that over here on my list already, so I need to go to the Load Family button here, and I'm going to load that from the library. If you go to the standard library, you'll see that there's a Detail Items folder. And open that up. That gives me a whole bunch of subfolders that are in division numbers. These are following the CSI master spec format. So if you're familiar with CSI and master spec, then this should be a pretty comfortable organization for you. If you're not familiar with master spec, then take some time to explore in here and kind of get comfortable with it. But they all have the descriptions at the end of the folder, so that's certainly going to help you find the right folder. So I'm going to go into the metals folder and then into the metal fabrications folder. And then finally, we have a metal stairs folder. And what I usually do here is I click the first item and I use the arrows on my keyboard to page through the available items. And you can see over on the right, the preview changes as I do that. So the second item here, stair, steel pan, and section, that's the item that I want to bring in. So I'm going to make sure that's selected. I'll click open. You'll see it appear on my cursor. Notice where the insertion point is. It's kind of at the top of the tread. So I can actually highlight the tread here in the model. And you don't have to get it super close, but I'm going to get it close because I'm actually going to line it up by the back instead of the front. So I'll do that a little bit later. But notice that when it comes in, like the whiteout mask that we saw in the break mark, this one has what we call a filled region inside of it that's giving us that stipple hatch pattern, and it's still covering up the 3D model underneath. Now, if I click the Modify tool and cancel out of there, what I want to do is actually move this in 2 steps here. What I'm going to do first is select it, go to my Move command, and I want to just move it horizontally, like so, because I want to snap precisely using this back point here to a back point over here. So I'm going to go move again, and I'm going to find this endpoint right there, and I'm going to snap that exactly to that endpoint right there. So sometimes it's easier to just get it in roughly and then move it where it wants to go. Now I have one more component that I want to bring in. I'm going to go back to my detail component tool, and we're going to do load family again. I'll go back to my detail items folder, back to metals, and this time I'm going to go to structural steel framing. And if you look here in the list of options that are here, and again, do the trick where you page through, what you're going to see is that each of the items in this folder has 3 versions. So there's a top, a side, and a section. So what I want to do is bring in this angle shape in its side view. Remembering that these are 2D objects, that's why they have 3 different versions. Now, when I click open here, that will display a window that we haven't seen yet. This is a type catalog, and the specified types window appears. And what a type catalog does is it's a way of managing all the types that are in a particular family. If you look at this scroll list over here, there are dozens of types in this family, way too many to load in all in one shot, so your list would become unmanageable. So they give us the type catalog to allow us to go in and scroll through this list and choose one or more items that we're interested in bringing into our project. So you could select a single item. You could use the Shift key and select a group of items. You could select with the Control key and do a discontinuous group, or you can just select just the one you want. Okay, so I'm going to scroll down here, and I want an L 2 by 2 by 1/8 of an inch. So this item right here. I'm going to click OK, and it's only going to load that single type into my project. It says to click to enter the component start point. So this is a new kind of detail component that we haven't seen yet. All the others, we just click to point and place them. This one is what we call a line-based detail component. That means you're going to click 2 points here, and then you drag out how long you want it to be, and I'll do about 6 inches, and then here. And you can see it draws me that angle in an elevation view and a side view. So detail components typically represent real things. They typically represent actual objects. However, they do it in a much more detailed fashion than we typically want to do in our 3D model. So they're two-dimensional and they're view specific. When we place them in a view, they sit on top of the view and cover up the underlying geometry, and we can use those to help us flesh out our detailed drawings. In this movie, I'd like to look at the array feature. The array feature is a powerful copy command. What makes it special is it's actually a parametric array. Now, what we mean by parametric typically is anything where the original parameters that were used to create the object remain available for us to manipulate in the future. And so if we have a parametric array, then what we're saying is all the parameters we establish in the array, the multiple copy basically, those parameters will remain available and we'll be able to adjust them afterwards if the design dictates. So in this case, I'm going to use the array feature here in this file called array, and I'm working on my stair detail, and I'm going to array this item right here. This is a detail component item that represents a single stair tread, and I actually have 3 treads here, so I want to create an array of those. So I've got it selected. I'll click the array button. And let's kind of look at the options that we have here on the options bar. Now, the first thing you'll notice is a little dash box goes around the item that I had selected. That looks a lot like the group item that we saw in a previous movie. Well, in fact, it is a group item because right here you can see that the default behavior of the array command is to group it and associate it. So the grouping part we'll look at in a few moments, but the associate part, that's the parametric part. So the two kind of work together. Now next to that, we had linear and radial. So it actually is possible to array along a curve, but in this case, we're going to array along a straight line. So I'm going to leave that set to linear. For the number, I'm going to click in here and put in 3. And then over here, I want to make sure that I'm using the second option. Now there's two options here. Move to second and move to last. Second is what you choose if you know how far apart you want each of your arrayed items to be. And last is what you use if you know the overall total distance that you want your array to fit into. So in this case, because I'm working with stair treads, I know how big each tread is, so I want the second option. The last setting here is constrain. I want to make sure that I don't check that in this case, because that would limit me either to a horizontal or a vertical direction, but we actually want to array along a diagonal. Now I want to be careful here when I'm clicking my points on screen, because you want to make sure the focus is in the drawing window, and if you click, it's going to activate the first point. So what I'm going to do here is roll my wheel. That's a good way to tell whether the view window is active before you start to click. If it's not, it might still be active in this text field right here. What you can do is just click this little radio button right here. That will kind of shift the focus away from the number field and allow you to roll over here and verify that you're in fact in the drawing window. What I'm going to do is use the underlying model to pick my reference points. So I'm going to snap right here at the end point of my first tread and then move diagonally down to the corresponding point on the next one and click again. And when I zoom back out a little bit, what you'll see is this gray temporary dimension here with the number 3. That's the quantity of the arrayed items. Now that's interactive. That's the associate part. So if I put in number 2 here and press enter, notice that I get only 2 arrayed items. If I click it again and I try 6, now I've got 6 items, but of course they go off the screen because they're underneath that crop region. So I'm going to click on 6 and I'm going to set that back to 3. But that's the associate part of the array. So later we can come back and change the quantity of items if we like. Now I'm going to deselect everything, zoom in a little. Here's the other part of associate. If I select one of these items and start to move it, you're going to see all 3 items move accordingly. In other words, when we talk about associate, it's not just the quantity, it's also the distances between them. So that second or last, you can actually modify after the fact by using the move command. Now I just did it by eye here and I'm going to undo that, but I wanted you to see what we mean by associate. So let's go ahead and undo. That's the parametric quality of this array. Now, you may notice here a small gap right there. The depth of this item is pretty good, but the height isn't quite right. And that's because the family that we're using for the stair tread came in at a default size of a 7-inch tread. But if you come over here and click your stair in the background, remember, this is still a live model view. So I can actually select that stair there in the background. It's a live object here. And if we scroll down, the actual riser height is 6 and 171 256 of an inch. Now remember that number because it's going to be important in the next step. So that's the actual riser height. Now here's what I want to do. I'm going to select one of my arrayed items. It doesn't matter which one because they're grouped. So as we saw in the groups movie, we can edit any one of the group members and it will apply to all of them. I'm going to choose Edit Group over here on the ribbon. In Edit Group, I can now select the individual family. I'm going to choose Edit Type on this stair steel pan family. And here you'll see the height or the rise is 7 inches. Now, did you remember that number that we looked at a moment ago? It was 6 and 171 256 inches. Make sure you use inches so that you don't end up with feet here. And when I click OK, that will shorten the size of the riser here so that it matches our underlying stair. And when I click Finish, it will apply that change to all instances of the group. So we're actually benefiting in two ways from the array. We benefit in the associated part where we can change the quantity and the spacing, and we benefit also in the group part like we've just seen. So let's look at one more example of that. If I select this item instead, now it's important this time that I select this item because when I edit group here, what I actually want to do is take this angle here in the background that we placed in the previous movie, and I want to add that to the group. So here I've got an add button. When I click that, I'm going to touch this detail item right here and then click finish. And notice that that gets added to the other two instances of the group. So very useful to have this grouped and associated array here because it gives me a lot of really nice benefits. Now you may be noticing that it looks a little odd over here. Detail components have stacking order. So this guy was created last, so it sits on top. And we created this break line much earlier. All I have to do is select the break line element. And over here on the ribbon, I can choose bring to front. And now it will cover up that other item there. So the array feature is a powerful multiple copy tool that has built-in parametric and grouping properties. This allows us to take advantage of both the features of groups and the parametric features of the association feature and interact with that series of copies in a live way as the design changes. So later, if the design changes, I can manipulate the array and I don't have to start all over again. In this movie, we're going to look at filled regions and masking regions. Filled and masking regions are two-dimensional shapes that you can apply to your views that help you to either cover up or to further articulate certain parts of the drawing. Like other detailing components in Revit, they are view-specific, so they only appear in whatever view you draw them in, and they are two-dimensional. Now, if you've watched some of the previous movies, you've already kind of seen the effects of filled and masking regions. If I zoom in a little bit here on this view, over here on the right-hand side, this break mark component that we have actually has a masking region built into it. So when I select it, these grips here are controlling the shape of that masking region, and that's what's covering up the underlying model. This concrete fill pattern that we have here in the steel pan, that's actually a filled region that's built into that detail component. So we've really already seen both of these components. We've just seen the result of them. So what I want to do now is show you how to draw those yourself. So if we look at our stair here, we've got this nice component and the angle and everything is looking pretty good, but we're still seeing some of that background information there of the stair beyond. Now, I can't really hide the stair. I'm going to use temporary hide just to show you because I lose too much. So let's reset that. So what I really want to do is just hide the stuff that I don't want to see in this view. So I'm going to do that with a masking region. So I'm going to go to the Annotate tab, and the region tool has the two options, filled region and masking region. They both work exactly the same way. The only difference is the masking region is like a piece of whiteout. It's a solid white mask. And the filled region, you get to choose a fill pattern that you want to apply to that mask. So we're doing the masking region first here. And you'll see over here on the ribbon that I have a variety of tools. And I've got some line styles here. So I'm going to stick with the straight line tool. And then over here for the line styles, I'm going to choose a medium line. And I'm going to simply trace right over the existing geometry here. Now I'm going to just kind of do a portion of it here to here and here to here and then out here somewhere. Now, you may be wondering why I did it that way. Well, what I want to make sure is that I'm exactly snapped to that proper angle, and then I know I can just use my trim command to clean this up. Like so. So there's my basic shape. I'll click finish and you can see the shape there when it's selected, but when I deselect it, what happened? Well, as you may recall, all of these elements have a stacking order. So all I have to do is select this mask and choose send to back, and it will drop behind all of the other two-dimensional view-specific components, but when I deselect it, it stays in front of the 3D model. So it's really important to understand that these Arrange tools, send to back and send to front, only apply to 2D elements. Sometimes people think that they can send a 2D element behind a 3D element. It doesn't work that way. It's 2D stacking order only. All right, let's continue over here. And I'm going to use a filled region to indicate the concrete topping on the landing a little bit more accurately. So it's currently this really thin material and we have this object in the way. I'm going to go in here with a filled region and make it a little bit thicker and change the shape slightly. So I'm going to go to the region drop down, go to filled region. Again, I can choose a line style. So this time I'm going to use medium lines for this top edge. And I'm going to just trace that right along here. And again, I'm going to make it a little too long. But then I'm going to switch to a thin line. Zoom in a little here, and I'm going to trace around this angle. If you don't have chain on it, miss that one there in the middle. So you can actually check the chain button here and follow that. And press escape once. I'm going to go back to medium lines. And I want to draw a line that matches the top of that piece of steel there. Press escape, zoom out, and then I need one more line out here somewhere. And again, like before, I find it easier to just give myself an edge in each of the locations where I need it, and then go to trim and trim it up. And I find that a little easier, but feel free to draw it directly if you like. Now, the important thing that I've done here is I've switched line styles in the middle. So notice that these are thin lines. I don't want those to overpower the underlying detail component. And then I've got my thicker lines over here. Now, the last thing I need to do is change the fill pattern. If I were to click finish here, I'm going to get a diagonal crosshatch. Now, that may be fine, but if we open up the list over here, I've got others to choose from. So what I want to use is this one called concrete fill so that I get a little bit more accurate representation of what I'm after. Once again, I'll select this, send it to back. And of course, we could do more of the same to continue to clean up. Like there's still a little component showing in there, and we could clean that up. Now, there's a few more finishing touches that we'd want to do to this detail. Many of these we've talked about before, so I'm just going to point them out to you, and then I'll show you the final result here. We can, of course, add notes and point those notes into the various components. You can add any dimensions that are required for this detail. Dimensions work the same way on detail views that they did in plan views. You just simply use your tab key if you're not getting the correct element dimension. And then finally, if I highlight here, you can see the stair showing through in the background. That's the live stair again. Sometimes people like to outline that with a dashed line to kind of let folks know that there's actually stair treads back there. You can do that in two ways. You can either trace over it with detail lines. If I click on detail lines and I choose a hidden line type, I could trace over and draw those lines. I'm going to undo that. Or we could use the line work tool with a hidden line, like we did in a previous movie. To do that, you would just change temporarily to wireframe here. That will let you see the stair beyond. Then you can go to your line work tool, choose your hidden line style, touch the lines. When you restore this back to hidden line, you'll see that that line will remain as a dashed line. And your final result might look something like this. So I've got this file called Stair Detail Complete, and it's included with the exercise files, and you can feel free to open it up and take a look. But this is what our final detail looks like.